We have had an amazing time this weekend at this retreat. It has been incredible, right? But the best part, in my opinion, was that we were all with each other. And it's been so much fun because you guys are the most amazing people on the planet. I know everybody says that, but you really are. On behalf of every youth leader, I want you to know that we have loved hanging out with you this weekend. And our hope is that as you enjoy being with each other, I hope maybe you even connected with God in a new way too. This weekend, we talked a lot about this one of a kind person that we are in God, right? He created all of us to be unique and He called us His children. That's the most important thing about who we are, what God says about us. Then we said that if we believe that's true, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made by a God who loves us, then it should change the way we think about and even talk about ourselves and to ourselves. We should treat ourselves like we're one of a kind. Last session, we talked about how important it is that we know we can be real with God. And maybe some of you even got real with God for the first time ever this week. And that is amazing. But here we are this morning, and we're going to wrap everything up, put it all in one package. I have one last chance to share something just with you. Sometimes, when we begin to learn more about God and the relationship that He wants to have with us, it's easy to start feeling like we need to be doing stuff for God, like this retreat, for example, in order to stay cool with Him. And I'm guessing that you might have felt that way before. Maybe you feel that way now. It's like being a Christian is all about doing stuff for God to make Him happy. And even though we come to retreats like this and we hear messages that tell us that God loves us no matter what and that He accepts us even though we're sinners, that God's love isn't based on what we do, we still struggle to believe that. That's just kind of our nature. It's hard for us to believe that He just loves us. Most of us still live with this voice in our heads that says, yeah, that's all fine and good when I'm at church, but life goes on and I've still got to do good stuff or God's going to be disappointed in me. Well, which one is it? Do we have to work for it or not? Do we have to be doing all this stuff for God in order for us to feel like He's with us? Is faith about being good with God or working for God? A long time ago, this guy named Paul wrote a letter to a group of people that he loved very much. Paul was a leader in the early church, and he spent his time traveling, starting churches, and sharing the message of Jesus with other people. When he would leave, he would write them letters, often to encourage them to live out their faith that he had taught them. And here's what Paul wrote in one of his letters. He says, God saved you by His grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for it. It's a gift from God. And salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done so that none of us could boast about it. And that's Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 and 9. So Paul essentially was saying, look, starting a relationship with Jesus has exactly zero to do with your behavior. You can't do anything to get it. It comes from God's grace and His willingness to do what it takes to have a relationship with you, to give us His love even though we don't deserve it. That's what some of you discovered for the first time this weekend. Because of grace, Jesus doesn't run from the real you. Instead, He runs right towards you. All you have to do is believe it. Now think about that for a second. You don't have to do one single good thing to convince God to love you, to like you, to be close to you, and to call you His child. Now that's pretty amazing to me. But Paul didn't even stop there. And he went on and he says this: we are God's masterpiece. And that's Ephesians 2, verse 10. In other words, we are each one of a kind. We're all unique and we are all a work of art created by God. Paul continues and he says this: He has created us new in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things He planned for us a long time ago. Ephesians 2, verse 10. Now, wait a minute. Didn't Paul just say that we don't have to do anything for God to love us and save us? Now he's saying we have to do stuff? Why would he say both? It seems like a conflict, right? Well, I think that the answer is because both of them are true. And I'll try to explain for you. We don't have to work for God to become a Christian. Okay? We don't have to work for that or earn it. That's true. That's a fact. But when we follow Jesus, he's inviting us to do good things with him. Paul said that God was planning for us to do good things long ago. In other words, God had always planned for us to do good in the world. Why? Because he was planning to do good in the world. This isn't about us working for God. He doesn't need our help. It's about us being invited to work with him, to join him in what he's doing, to participate in all of the good things that he's doing in the world around us. Now that feels different, right? God isn't saying you have to work for me, you have to earn this. He's saying we're already good, and because we're good, I want you to work with me as I do some good in the world. To put it in more fancy terms, it's about your participation, not your obligation. Maybe that feels weird to you. Maybe it's never crossed your mind that God could or would use you to do something in the world. Well, look back at Paul's words. You are God's masterpiece. You were made specifically and intentionally. Think about the word masterpiece when it comes to art or music or literature. A masterpiece is a one of a kind. And according to Paul, you are just that. You are a masterpiece created by God to do good in the world around you. Your one of a kindness is actually helpful as you join God's purpose in the world. And God has a purpose for you that's one of a kind. We are all a unique mix of how we're wired. Everybody's different, right? How we grew up, the experiences that we've had, so on. And a one-of-a-kind mix gives a one-of-a-kind way to serve the world, a one-of-a-kind way to participate in what God is doing around us. Because God has a purpose for you that's one of a kind. Now, if you're like I was when I was in school, you assume that that means preaching, leading worship, becoming a missionary, right? Isn't that the number of ways that God uses our talents? Isn't that limited to church stuff? No, it's not. Remember, God doesn't have this little tiny bag of talents to choose from. It's not like he's waiting on us to become pastors in order for us to serve one another. That wouldn't even make sense, right? For all of us to be pastors. So what talents does he want to use? He wants to use the ones you already have. Not only can God use your personality and your talents to help other people, he can use them to draw you closer to him along the way. And the good news is he can do it anywhere. You don't have to be here at a weekend retreat to feel close to or used by God. God has a purpose for you that is one of a kind. And that purpose goes with you wherever you go. It's part of the way that he created you. And you can start living it out no matter where you are. Because when you know who you are, and you know who you belong to, you discover that God has a purpose for you that's one of a kind. So what now? Well, here's 3 things that I hope you keep doing this week and every day of your life. Continue spending time with God. When you get home, look for ways to stay connected and keep growing in your relationship with God. Maybe put together a playlist of some music that reminds you of some of the things we've learned on this retreat. Or take time to write in your journal, jot down a few prayers that you have each day or some things that you learned at church this week. You could download a Bible app and pick a reading plan like the one that we made just for this retreat. You can start reading your devotionals, right? You can memorize a few verses or ask your small group leader to help you figure out where to start reading the Bible, what parts, right? Pick out 1 or 2 things to keep doing when you get back home to keep spending time with God. Then I want you to think about your purpose, the one-of-a-kind thing that God has just for you to do with him. And to do that, you have options. You can ask people around you what you're good at. If you can't immediately identify 1 or more of your talents, ask people who love you and know you. They will point out things that you may not have ever thought of as a talent. They'll help you see the gifts that you have in you. And that will encourage you to see those gifts in yourself as well. Start using your gifts to serve others. Showing God's love to others through your actions is a powerful reflection of Jesus' love for us. By loving other people, we have the opportunity to live out what God is doing in our own life. So think about what you can do with your one-of-a-kind gifts when you get home to serve others with God. Wake up each day and ask God for opportunities to use your one-of-a-kind gifts for His glory. Ask God to use the wonderfully created and super talented you to show love to others as a way to reflect His unconditional love for us. It's that simple. Look, keep loving God and showing God's love to others. God has a purpose for you that's one of a kind, and He wants to use that purpose to help other people experience His love for them. Now, as we close out this amazing weekend, I want you to write one last thing on your shoe. You ready? Write this down. I am made for a purpose. At the beginning of the weekend, we talked about how God is the God of peace. And we use our shoes as a reminder that He can crush those lies, right? And we believe that as we walk with Him, He will do that. Many of you have felt Him do that. And during this weekend, in sessions with small groups, you felt the difference that makes and the peace that you have when you begin to trust who God says you are. And as we get ready to head out, I want you to know that this is a process. Trusting God's view of you is something you'll have to decide to do over and over and over. But it's something you can do. And I hope that every time you look at your shoes, you remember this weekend. Now, before you go, I want you to have one more reminder. One of the lies that we all believe, one that hurts us and holds us back and wrecks the peace in our brains more than anything else, is this: I don't matter. On some level, we all tend to believe that we aren't smart enough, we aren't talented enough, we aren't skilled enough, we aren't rich enough, or you fill in the blank, enough to make a difference in the world. But Paul's letter reminds us that that is not true. You matter because you are a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, created to do one-of-a-kind good things in the world. And no one else brings quite what you bring to the world around you. And God is inviting you to use that in a powerful way with Him. He made you, He loves you, and He's inviting us to walk with Him as He does amazing good stuff in the world around us. So as you follow Him, you may just find that you're living a life that's one of a kind.